Hey everyone, this is Polygonal. Wait, let's. Okay, hey everyone, this is Polygonal Podcast, episode 2. We're back. I'm your host Serge, and I'm with my co-host.
Ian, hello.
Hey everyone. Now, Ian, what have you been up to? Actually, I know what you've been up to. You have been to a cruise.
I went on a cruise a few weeks ago. Started in Hamburg. We went to Rotterdam, Bruges, and Le Havre. So four countries I'd never been to before. As a Canadian, I never been to the European mainland. So got like a day in each place, which was a nice sampler anyway.
Nice. Did you take any of your handheld consoles? Maybe? Did you play anything at all?
Yeah, I brought my Switch. There was a lot of train rides, a lot of sitting around waiting for things, and for that, I was playing the new Metroid Prime remaster.
Nice. We talked about this last time. I think we brought it up, but go ahead and tell me how what do you think about that.
I think it's an excellent remaster. At some point, Serge, I'm going to have you play that game because you haven't played too many Metroidvanias. I really like the Metroid series. Prime is probably one of the few true. Well, when I say true, I mean like a hardcore Metroidvania, classical Metroidvania that's in 3D and in first person as well. So there's a lot of things about it that are pretty unique to that subseries of Metroid titles. The original Metroid Prime is a classic. Famously, it's like one of the highest rated Metacritic games of all time, if that's your thing. Um, and now it's on Switch. I'm usually pretty skeptical of remasters, but this one is really solid. They've redone all the textures, models, visuals in a way that pretty much preserves all of the excellent art style of the base game. And then the gameplay itself is, of course, true to form. So I'm just having a blast going through and replaying it again.
Yeah, we talked about this last time, and what the thing that stood out for me was the very unique way you control that game. And when I was editing the previous episode, I kind of had a chance to watch a bit more videos on that game, and it is pretty unique. And I am looking forward to giving that a try. I will use the classic method to control that game. Um, so yeah,
Nice.
once you finish that, let me know. Have you actually finished that game like years ago when it was out?
Not when it came out, but many years ago, I've finished it a couple times at this point. So I'd say that I'm pretty familiar with everything going on in there, in terms of game structure and everything.
Right. Okay. So what else is new?
Um, hmm. Beyond that, I've been playing Tekken 6. I've been going through the Tekken games really slowly over the past couple of years, getting
Mm.
myself more properly acquainted with the series, going through each one chronologically. I have this weird thing. A lot of people will just pick up the latest game in a series, particularly for a game like Tekken. I mean, you've got so many characters with enormous move lists, really complex mechanics. It's a kind of game where I actually like seeing the evolution of the series. I like seeing what's changed with each one. And I think a great way to ease yourself in is to start with an earlier entry like Tekken 3, Stone Cold Classic. I love that game. But by going back and replaying Tekken 3, I was able to kind of refamiliarize myself with a smaller cast. And then each one adds just a few new characters. And each one, oh, I can see with this game they slowed it down. And then in response, they sped the next one up a little bit. I like seeing that kind of stuff, the evolution of a series. So I'm up to Tekken 6 now, and each one is taking a little bit longer to get familiar with because the games are just getting bigger and bigger. And I never quite jumped into Tekken 7, and I'm hoping that I can maybe catch the tail end of that before Tekken 8 comes out next year.
Yeah, I think Tekken 6 is something I kind of skipped myself. I played a lot of 5, then kind of skipped 6 and jumped into 7. I really liked 7. 7 was the one where it was like I wasn't sure if Tekken still had it, and they kind of brought it back with 7. It was really tight. And 8's actually one of the news pieces we'll discuss today has to do with 8, and it's looking pretty good. So I'm
I
looking
loved
forward to that one.
I love Tag too. That was a big one that I played casually with some friends. So I'm looking forward to going back to that one, revisiting it in light of everything that I've learned now, because Like back then, I was pretty much just mashing buttons, right? And then now a much deeper understanding and respect for everything that Tekken pulls off, which is just so much complexity, so much content in one really beautiful package. I think I really like fighting games as aesthetic pieces. I think Tekken has a great art style, just excellent music. It's the kind of game you can just vibe with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're after complexity, wait till you see Tekken 8, the preview. That definitely has tons of that, and has a lot of new systems.
So what have you been playing?
Well, I've been playing a couple of things. First of all, I've been playing Steel Rising. Now, I thought I was following this game when it was announced, but then kind of flew under my radar. It's made by Spiders, which is a French studio. They've uh, they've been known for a few games. They started with Of Orcs and Men, kind of way back, about 10 years ago. Then there was Mars War Logs, and then there was Bound by Flame, which is actually a game I wanted to try, but never kind of pulled the trigger on that. It came out in 2014, right around the time of Dragon Age Inquisition, and back then I was kind of looking for similar games, and that game looked similar. It was kind of like fantasy action RPG, but in the end, kind of never really sat down and played it.
I've never heard of any of these games.
Yeah, they are. Well, they are a studio that's almost there in many ways. Like a lot of their games are kind of they get like decent reviews, but then something is missing, and they just never get this quality right in almost all of them. They had also a game like Fairy Legend of Avalon that was a really weird one where you controlled this flying fairy. There was the Technomancer afterwards, and then kind of like nothing for a few years, and then recently they came out with the Greedfall. Have you heard about that one?
No, I haven't.
Greedfall is an open world RPG where you control this. I think it's kind of like a pirate slash France theme thing. You control, you play as this. I don't know who even like. I guess you create a character and you explore this world. Kind of looks like a bit of a Assassin's Creed, a bit of you know open world Skyrim type of thing. I think it reviewed okay, but I've never tried it myself. And after that, they announced Steel Rising, and actually it came out in September last year, and I just kind of missed that release window. And recently, I saw this game on trial on PS5. You know how the trials work on PS5, Ian?
No, how do they work?
So they are similar to demos, except they give you the full game. You download it, you install it, and then you can play 2 hours of it. When you start the game, the timer starts, and however you want to play it for 2 hours, you play the full game. So it's a pretty cool idea, but it has its flaws. First of all, unlike a demo, you can't replay it. After the 2 hours are up, you have to either buy it or you uninstall the game. But unlike the demos, some demos, you get the actual released game as your experience, because some demos historically sometimes they're not really representative of the actual game, the final game. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. As developers, we know that sometimes demo work takes up a lot of resources as well of development time. It's never ideal. So I guess trials are a good way of like making sure that your development team is focusing on developing the game, and then also giving potential players a chance to experience it exactly how it is.
It seems like we all miss demos, and yeah, I guess they are just so much work. And back in the day, you needed a demo to be representative of the final product, because the only thing you had to go on might have been screenshots in a magazine. But now that we have gameplay videos on YouTube, they kind of mostly serve the purpose of demos. But it's great
Yes.
to see. It's great that Sony's offering a simple easy way for devs to, if they want to, they can opt in, because not all games fit that 2 hour window particularly well, but that people can have that taste before they want to drop their hard earned cash on a bigger thing.
I mean, it's not without its problems for sure. Like I mentioned, you can't replay it, and there's only a few games on the PS5 that actually have this kind of feature. Um, this one had it, so I checked it out. I actually wanted to play it already, so I thought might as well.
Did you ever have a demo that you played again and again that you kept coming back to?
I don't remember. Maybe it's one of the fighting games, probably.
What about like the MGS2 demo?
Oh, I don't think I've ever played that.
Oh wow,
No.
it's the tanker section from the game. It was in came bundled with Zone of the Enders.
Oh yeah, I never played that. Did it have the full tanker section?
Full, I think it was the full tanker section, and there's
Wow.
just so much obsessive detail in that section that
Mm,
people would just, you know, just play it again and again to just see
right. Yeah.
everything that was tucked away.
Yeah. So this game here is essentially, I would call it a Bloodborne clone.
Okay.
It takes a lot of inspiration from Bloodborne. It's alternative reality fronts where the king, instead of being dethroned and beheaded, I guess, instead he made a bunch of robots and took over. And these robots, one of the robots is your playable character. I think she's called Aegis. You start a game with kind of cutscene with Marie Antoinette. She sends you on a mission. Before that, you can customize your appearance. A few things you can customize. The haircut, stuff like that. But you look like a kind of like a French mannequin, I guess, with robot combined into one, with a fancy outfit and a fancy hairdo.
It's a cool look.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting for sure. It has its the theme. Like I think Spiders kind of ever since Greedfall, they are on this French themed role. A lot of their games have this French flavor, French/pirate. I don't dislike it necessarily. So you make your character and you choose your weapon. It's really similar again to Bloodborne. You choose your main weapon, you choose your secondary weapon. Actually, you choose your main weapon first, and then you can find your secondary weapon later on. And pretty quickly you are off on your mission. It controls pretty similar to Bloodborne. You have your HP, you have your stamina. A big difference here is that the stamina management is really important, and it's quite punishing when you run out of stamina. You get slowed down, you can't attack, you can't run, you can just move. There are ways to prevent that. So when your stamina runs out, if you quickly press triangle, you can regain some of the stamina. So it's similar to the health.
E-Pulse.
Yeah, when you could regain health in Bloodborne by attacking enemies. That's a similar system here.
Neo had the key pulse, where if you tapped R1 after losing stamina, you could instantly gain some back as well.
Yeah, I think it's really similar to that as well. You have your items. I think it's like an oil thing that can repair you. Um, the combat is again pretty similar to Bloodborne, pretty fast paced. The thing that stands out immediately is that there's really no way to block. So it's not really like a Dark Souls. You're encouraged to outmaneuver your enemies, get behind them, get hits quickly before they do. At some point in the game, they even give you a gun as well, very similar to Bloodborne. Although in this case, the gun isn't really to trigger a critical hit. It's more, well, at least the gun I found was able to freeze enemies after a few shots. There's no magic in this game, but there's enhancements to the weapons. Um, Exploration and actually, I wanted to mention level design. It's I think this is where the kind of jankiness of Spiders stands out a bit. I don't want to oversell this. It's mostly fine, but there's a bit of some animations don't blend together that well. Some of the ways you traverse and jump and kind of get stuck sometimes are also not ideal. So there's a bit of that junk in this game, but again, it doesn't really detract from the overall experience. I think for the most part it's fine. They definitely learned a lot of lessons from Souls like in general. There's a lot of ways you walk, you traverse the environments, you walk back on yourself, you unlock some of the shortcuts, but even then it's sometimes it does feel like you are exploring something that's actually smaller than it looks. There's a lot of closed gates that are very unclear how to open. I think there's probably some Metroidvania elements as well to this game, where you can come back to the previous levels and maybe unlock them once you have other abilities.
Do you feel like there are some unique ideas in here that you aren't seeing in other similar titles?
Honestly, very minor, and the ones that are there are just like a modification of something that Bloodborne had. Like again, that stamina recovery thing. It's different. You don't recover your health, but it really is just an inspired system from Bloodborne. You can approach enemies and kill them with stealth, like a one-hit kill sometimes. So there is some sort of like stealth element to this. But again, Bloodborne had it as well. So it's somewhat like a modified version of something you already saw in Bloodborne. I can't fault them too much. Bloodborne is an amazing game, one of my all-time favorites. So anything that plays like that and has similar systems, I welcome it. But there's definitely sometimes it feels like maybe it was developed by somebody who likes Bloodborne, but maybe not doesn't quite fully understand some of the reasoning behind why From Software did the things they did.
Sounds like Spiders is getting there. Maybe one to watch out for.
Yeah, it has a full set of equipment. Full gear, weapons, secondary weapons. It has a mod slot that you can kind of modify the performance of your character. Has a bit of crafting as well, I think. Bosses. There was I in the 2 hours I fought 2 bosses actually. One of them they're pretty similar. Again, they're hard at the start, and then you figure out how to fight them properly, and then they become easier. So I actually enjoyed the boss fights probably the most, because there was a really a jump in difficulty for sure. Although normal enemies can also fuck you up, and they do. If you don't get HP regen, if you run out of healing items, you die. There's nothing you can do. You can either pick up health potions from defeating enemies, or you can buy them. But if you don't have any of those options, you're shit out of luck, essentially. One of the things I did notice is that the environments are kind of samey. The biomes are just again, I only played 2 hours, but in that 2 hours I played the intro, the first area, and then the second area, which was Paris, or outskirts of Paris, and they kind of looked similar. There's not a lot of vertical movement in this game. That's one of the things that stood out to me compared to like just just about any Souls game, where there's no ladders and you really don't get to explore like interiors, maybe different floors. A lot of most of the action is just on this one plane, and it kind of starts being noticeable the further you go. But yeah, I think overall I kind of enjoyed it. It definitely has potential, and I want to finish it. There's side quests and NPCs, but very similar to Bloodborne, they are not really on screen much. And the one I did find in Paris was behind a closed door. Again, very similar to Bloodborne. She was speaking to me through the closed door and giving me quests like that. So definitely a lot of inspiration from there. Yeah.
Well, if now that they have this base to work with, they can figure out their own identity in the next title.
No, yeah. I think what I enjoy about Spiders is that they are not afraid to fail and do something else, do a new game, different idea, new idea, to try something new. I think that's something a lot of developers need a lot more of, and especially in the West, where there's a lot of like, oh, we failed in this one game, well, now we're done. I mean, obviously there's realities of, business realities, financial realities, but I've said this before and I'll say it again. If From Software didn't persevere through some of their games that weren't as amazing, maybe it would have never had a Bloodborne, a Demon Souls, Dark Souls. That is just how it is, and I see that quite often in the West, where you really get only one chance, and then if you don't put out something amazing, you oftentimes you're done. It's kind of sad.
It looks like Spiders is more of a budget friendly team, whether they're making stuff that doesn't need to sell 5 million copies to pull a profit like a lot of these big American studios are doing. And so those studios are a lot more risk averse.
Yeah, they're a smaller studio. I think they're a bit less than 100 people. So, it obviously doesn't excuse you from making a bad game. I hope they continue and keep making games, and they're definitely getting better. Speaking of demos and trials, I tried the demo of Bayonetta Origins, Cereza, and the Lost Demon.
I really like Bayonetta 1 and 2, but I haven't played 3 yet, so it didn't feel appropriate to check this one out.
Well, I mean, it is a prequel, so I can report that it is definitely appropriate. It's
Well, it's more, I'm going to play 3, and then once I finish 3, then I will play this one.
Yeah, I finished 1 as well ages ago, and haven't finished 2 or 3 yet. And this one, it was announced on Nintendo, I think Game Awards last year, and I completely missed that announcement, and I just noticed it recently that the demo is out. The game is coming out, I think, this month, at the end of this month, and the demo is pretty generous, actually. I spent at least a couple of hours for sure playing it. It's an isometric action RPG. It's quite different from other Bayonettas 1, 2, and 3. It's a fixed camera experience, and you control Bayonetta. And the story is that she wants to rescue her mother, who was imprisoned, and she's training as a witch. And at some point, she summons this demon that possesses her cat, the Cheshire. And from the demos, from the trailers, it wasn't really clear what type of game this is in terms of gameplay. I knew it was visually stunning. It was like, I really enjoyed this storybook type of presentation. What do you think about that?
I think it looks great.
Yeah. I think it's a good example of playing to your strengths, like, not relying a lot on, fancy animations and like super big budget. You can have a lot of interesting visual themes with just having a fixed camera. I think that helps them a lot.
I guess this would have been a separate team working alongside the Bayonetta 3 people, maybe a smaller team producing a smaller title. So looking at the footage, I mean, it's pretty different from regular Bayonetta gameplay. Would you say that it feels similar in some ways, or just been recontextualized to maybe more of an adventure game format?
I think it's quite different. And the biggest difference, again, like I mentioned, because in the trailers it wasn't really clear, but once you start playing, it's very obvious. This is a single-player co-op experience. So you control, you control Bayonetta with your left stick, and you control the Cheshire with your right stick at the same time. So, if you're somebody who may be a dyslexic, or maybe someone who doesn't like that kind of experience, maybe it makes you dizzy or whatever, that it might not be for you at all, because it definitely requires you at times to move them at the same time. But let's say if Bayonetta moves to the right and Cheshire to the left, the sticks are still as they are. You move Bayonetta with left stick and move Cheshire with the right stick. And sometimes it kind of gets confusing, especially when it's time to fight, because the way they want you to do this is they want you to use Bayonetta's magic to maybe, let's say, hold enemies, while you use Cheshire to pound them and to kill them. And at the same time, you have to worry about their positioning as well. So it was really surprising when that came up in the gameplay, and I was pleasantly surprised. It's definitely something very different.
Ignoring the story, ignoring the visuals, what about this still feels like Bayonetta?
Most of fighting is done by Cheshire, so the way you control him is kind of similar, maybe remotely, to how you would play Bayonetta 1, 2, and 3. But ultimately, I think this is a very different experience. This is much slower, and there's a lot more of strategic placement of your characters involved. So you have to make sure that Bayonetta is not getting hit while she's casting spells. Because I think, at least as much as I played, Cheshire was pretty much invincible or something. Like no one could touch him. He was just there to like go ham on enemies. But Bayonetta is the one that was getting damaged, and she has health. On the left, if you see on the footage, on the lower left corner, there's 2 flowers there. That's her health, but there's no health for Cheshire. So there's definitely an element of, well, you have to make sure that Bayonetta survives this every encounter. And they often, outside of about finding enemies, they often have you and Cheshire do like these traversal puzzle sequences where he cannot pass through something and she can, and then you have to use her to maybe open a path for Cheshire, or then Cheshire has to destroy certain, traversal bits to allow Benetta to pass, and vice versa. Luckily, overall, you can also go into this hug mode where Cheshire goes back to being like a plush toy, and with that, you just control Bayonetta, and you can kind of dangle him around to get some items. But overall, you just need to worry about moving her. So they don't really force you to use them separately all the time.
It sounds like something I really enjoy. I mean, I don't know how the story of 3 wraps up, but based on this, you can assume that Nintendo and Platinum want to do more with the series going forward. And I wonder if this is a testing ground. Use a spin off to take things in a radically different direction, and then when we get the next Bayonetta title, who knows what lessons they might learn from this.
Yeah, definitely. This is a very surprising departure, I think, overall, thematically, visually, and gameplay wise. Not sure what they. I honestly don't think I'll ever see this as the mainline Bayonetta title. But if they continue this as some sort of side project and make a sequel to this, I would definitely enjoy playing that. There's definitely potential here. And it looks great as well. The story and the presentation is really interesting. If you like storybook style things and kind of stylized graphics, the VO is also great. I should say. Yeah, that was Bayonetta Origins, Cerisa and the Lost Demon. It's nice. Apart from that, I think that's pretty much it. All right, we can get into news then. First bit of news, and do you want to take that one?
Oh, the Forspoken sales lackluster, Square Enix says. So,
Yeah.
have you played Forspoken?
I have not played that yet. I will play it. I'm not gonna join the crew of, people that so butthurt about some cringy voiceover that they're not gonna play this game. I will play it. I haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to it. It's from the FF15 team, and I think we both really like that game. I know not everybody does.
Yeah.
But I think Forspoken is also kind of to that taste. I've heard some people say that that the marketing didn't present the writing in the best light, but maybe it isn't as bad. I think it's going to be worth it, even just writing aside, even just to jump around that game. I think one thing that FF15 really got right was Noctis's traversal, his animations. Looking at Forspoken, one thing they seem to have really nailed that not every developer seems to nail these days is if you have a big open world, it's got to feel really good to traverse it. And the animations that our character is pulling off in Forspoken gameplay just look like they're going to feel excellent to perform.
Yeah, for sure. It looks great in action, and actually, most people that have played this game say at the very least that it controls and plays really well, and the magic is really impressive. One thing I want to say about the whole leading up to the release of this game, and when it was released, there's a lot of negativity overall, just kind of out of almost nothing. There was a cringy dialogue in a trailer or some high PC requirements, but I think that a lot of the general public and enthusiast press kind of jumped on this game and kind of made sure that there's a lot of negativity around it. I just wanted people to realize that, you don't really know, not really, what's going on behind closed doors, and how often the games are made and what decisions are being made. And there's a lot of speculation about. There's another piece of news about the CEO of Square Enix stepping down. A lot of people are tying this to the Forspoken, and this wild speculation. Even us as developers, at best, we could potentially speculate, but even then, I wouldn't be comfortable saying that the CEO, the Forspoken sales were so bad that CEO had to step down. That's really, really uncalled for. I think people need to step back and realize that, not everything is as it seems.
Yeah, they've also shuffled Luminous Productions back into Square Enix, and I suppose we'll see what that means. I take it as that team will be merging in. We won't be seeing stuff from that team specifically anymore. They'll be scattered around and assisting on other titles. And is that because of the sales of this game? Is that because of the departure of the CEO? Who's to say?
Well, like to assume that this kind of decision, merging Luminous Productions into Square Enix, was done within a span of like I don't know, a month or so, based on Forspoken, is, if you stop and think, that's so unrealistic. That kind of decision was probably in the works months and months before. It just doesn't happen overnight.
They announced it in February, and they said starting April, I believe
Yeah.
they're going to be dissolved. So maybe
So, well, yeah. So then, if when I see people saying, "Oh, well, Forspoken did pretty bad," so of course Luminous Productions are done. I mean, that's not how anything works, really. I'm sure Square Enix said their reasons, but
I don't always trust Square Enix's business decisions.
well, sure. But also, I feel like absorbing a team into the fold, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be doing anything else. Whether or not the Luminous engine is going to be used again, that's a question mark. Square Enix has been using Unreal Engine 5 recently, and I think Final Fantasy 16 was that on Unreal Engine 5 as well.
I want to say so. I feel like Luminous was the only team that still used their own engine. It was kind of the last vestige of that Square designing their own engine tech era from like the FF13 era that really bit them in the butt. And they seem to have mostly moved over to Unreal. That's allowed them to make games a lot faster, it seems. And I guess I feel like Luminous was a lot of that core engine people, so they were allowed to keep developing their own engine. But I'm not surprised that they would just unify everyone under one engine, because now they can share technology, and they don't have to spend, they must have spent absurd amounts of money making Forspoken look amazing on their own tech, only to have that be the only team at their company that is using that tech.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm a bit unclear on how Square Enix wants to proceed in terms of the engine tech they use. Forspoken and Final Fantasy 15 were the only games made in Luminous Engine to date. Again, that engine is still there. Square Enix can still use it. The people that did this game are still there. They're just not separate. So, well, maybe you can see another game with this engine. Maybe not. We'll see. All right. So, next news piece is what do we have here? I'll take this one. So, something is the Outer Worlds Spacer Edition has been announced. Now, have you played this game, Ian?
Haven't yet, no.
So I played this game to about half point, and at that point they, I think, announced the first DLC, and I just decided to wait once again for DLC and kind of never picked up again. And now they've announced a remaster for new gen consoles and an upgrade for a PC, and everyone's kind of throwing a fit over this. I think people don't realize how long ago this game came out. This game came out in 2019. It was developed by Obsidian, and I really enjoyed it. It was like a mini Mass Effect. Had interesting characters. Had really good writing, really funny as well. There's a lot of humor. The gameplay was really interesting as well. It was probably smaller than you would imagine. I think if you're coming into this game expecting the size of like Mass Effect or some other bigger games, you could potentially be disappointed. It was a really tight experience, like a smaller experience, but it was an interesting game. And I was getting remaster, and I think it's good. It's not free. I think you have to pay like about £5 to get this upgrade if you have the on PC. But I'm looking forward to trying it again and kind of starting it from the beginning and finishing it. Yeah, if you're interested in like story-driven, character-driven games like Mass Effect, definitely pick it up. And again, I would encourage everyone to be a bit, kinder to developers. I keep seeing this like outrage over this remaster. Even if you play the original game, that's fair enough. Don't get this. You don't need to. Like the only thing they did here was improve the graphics and bundle the DLC into this. So it's fine if you don't want to get it, but honestly, don't be so outraged over this. This game came out 4 years ago, not last year.
I think there is a certain cycle with these Obsidian games. I'm a big fan of. I know this is from the creators of Fallout One, Troika games like Arcanum, Temple of Elemental Evil, and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and then even some people who worked on titles like Fallout New Vegas. And maybe people don't remember that a lot of those games got kind of mixed reception when they first came out. Even Fallout New Vegas got positive reviews, but nowhere near close to the praise that Fallout 3 did. And then over time, people learned to look past maybe the outdated visuals or the bugs or even some of the janky combat. And underneath those was always a fantastic RPG. And I do want to play the Outer Worlds. I've been looking forward to it. And I wonder, when this game came out, I heard a lot of, it's all right. And I wonder what the legacy of this game is going to be a few years from now, how people are going to look back on it. Because Obsidian is like the king of cult RPGs. I mean, so many titles like, famously Neverwinter Nights 2, people didn't like the base game. But then the expansions dropped, and the expansions were considered, just amazing. Or Alpha Protocol is a game that a lot of people still bring it up as like, yeah, that was a pretty mediocre game. But I think for those who really gave it time and sat down with it, that game's fantastic. That game's doing things that you just don't see in other RPGs.
You mentioned Fallout New Vegas, and I think actually it's worth mentioning that this is probably the closest to that. Outer Worlds is probably closer to something like a Fallout game, New Vegas, than maybe Mass Effect even. The way companions work, the way combat works is actually pretty similar to that. Of course, this comes on the heels of that.
I'd be curious who is developing this, because it has the Obsidian logo there, but since 2019, Obsidian got bought by Microsoft, and it looks like this was released by the Outer Worlds publisher.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because I didn't see the Microsoft logo in that trailer, so I wonder if it's actually being developed by Obsidian or if it's being developed by a private division team because they own the Outer Worlds stuff.
I guess when you're bought by Microsoft, you suddenly have a lot of resources that you can spend on doing this kind of thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft brought in some muscle to kind of handle this while Obsidian works on. Well, actually, they're probably working on the next game in this because they announced Outer Worlds 2, I think last year. Have you seen that trailer? It's pretty funny.
No.
It's really funny. So that they are making the second game, and I'm hoping that they will keep this as a series. I really enjoyed it. Let's get to the next bit. The only news you need in your life. The one news that made my day, made my week. The news to end all news. Elden Ring: Shadow of the Erdtree has been announced. Hells yes, Ian. Actually, it's really hard for me to talk to you about this because you haven't finished Elden Ring.
I got one thing to say to you, From Software. Slow down, okay? Quit releasing such good stuff, so dense in content. I mean, I haven't finished Elden Ring. I haven't finished Sekiro. Okay, I barely made it to the end of Dark Souls 3. We've got Armored Core coming out. Please slow down. Take longer. Take way longer to make your games so I can have a chance. Like, is there anybody who has really exhausted all the content in Elden Ring at this point?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of content there for sure, and they recently released an update for PvP. You still need to check that out. They only released one screenshot for this announcement, and people have been, going nuts over speculating what it is. Without going into much detail, into spoilers, the game had multiple endings, had a bunch of normal ones and a couple of kind of interesting, unique endings that you could get. And one of them was you could say it was the bad ending. Really, things didn't turn out well for you as the character and the world, and people are leaning towards saying that this might be the continuation of that thread. You see Torrent, and someone is writing it. Looks, I don't know, Marika, maybe Millennia. It's unclear, to be honest. A lot of those characters, spoiler alert, you kill them, so they technically shouldn't be here. But it could be also be a prequel where everyone's alive still, and I don't really want to speculate. It's absolutely unclear what this is going to be about. Again, it could be prequel, could be a Bloodborne situation where it's some sort of parallel world thing. All you see here is just another tree in the distance, like a field, and somebody on a torrent.
I need to stop playing anything but FromSoft games if I want to keep up with them.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this, of course. Yeah. All right. What else do we have? Right, some Bethesda news. There was a Bethesda 25th anniversary celebration. They released a few news bits about Fallout 76 that's still being updated. And one thing that it had was that Fallout 4 is getting a next gen release. So a lot of remasters and re-releases recently. And Fallout 4 is not an exception to that rule. It's getting one. And once again, I actually haven't finished Fallout 4. I got to about halfway through when it first came out. I really enjoyed it. I actually, I wasn't part of the people that thought that the voice over for the main character was detracting from experience. In my opinion, that was perfect. So I know they're gonna move away from that with Starfield and such games. If you still want that experience, Fallout 4 is now getting that remaster, and I'm gonna jump back in and probably finish this game finally. Have you finished this?
No, I didn't. I was one of those people who didn't like the voice acting.
I think you could potentially get mods to kind of change that, but
Well, there are mods to see what you're going to say before you say it, but I think as a result, they had to streamline a lot of the decision making when you talk to people, because you can't have conversations branch out in 100. I mean, even if you compare Morrowind to Oblivion, Morrowind has plenty of optional conversations that you can have with NPCs, and you can talk to them about anything in the world because text is cheap, and all the minor conversations in Morrowind are just text. There's no voice acting. So when they switched to everybody having a voice in Oblivion, unfortunately, not only are there not enough voice actors for the size of that game, but as a result, they've really had to streamline a lot of the conversations, and the world loses a bit of flavor each time. Everything is a compromise. Everything's a trade off in game development. And I'm glad that they tried it for Fallout 4, but there is also part of me that is happy that they're going back to the other approach with Starfield.
Yeah, I guess it's always a balance, right? Like, do you want as many options and as much text as possible without VO, or do you want a bit less with VO? It's I don't know. I think I didn't feel with 4 that I was missing those deep conversation trees. Because for me, it felt really like Mass Effect, and I really like Mass Effect, and I think it's not impossible to do that, to have the best of both worlds. Mass Effect did it, Fallout tried to do it. It's not impossible. Do we really need to go back to the days of Fallout 1 where you would have like a wall of text for every single option, and then like 6-7 options for each conversation? It's
Fallout 1 is my favorite in the series, so
fair enough.
I'd say there's value in that.
There's value, but also actually nobody's making those games anymore. Even if you look at what's the game that's coming out? Baldur's Gate 3. It's coming out soon. Actually, has a release date finally.
Mm-hmm.
I need a minute to think.
I think that one is also leading to more towards having a bit less of that wall of text stuff and more kind of interactive VO. We'll see how that pans out, but I don't think the Fallout 1 style of conversations are coming back in any meaningful way.
I don't think so. I think you're right that they're probably not coming back, aside from the odd throwback title like Pillars of Eternity or there was the new Torment, Tides of Numenera title that came in a few years ago. But I think that's for other reasons than just something being a better approach. I think there's value in that. That lends to a much slower paced experience where players need to be willing to read a lot of text, and that's always going to limit your audience quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, uh, whoever finds that perfect balance, the holy grail, is gonna win the prize. All right, that was Fallout 4. Now, let's talk about Tekken. Tekken 8 has been announced for a while now. Recently, there was a sit down with the producer, and they went over some of the systems that will be introduced in this new title. I'm not going to go over all of the very mechanical systems and how they work. Just want to say that I think the way things are going for Tekken 8, it's going to be a much more of a dynamic and quicker game. There's going to be a lot more options of movement and a lot more management of different gauges and special powers and power-ups. It's kind of going to be more in line with other fighting games. What do you think, Ian?
Tekken's in an interesting position. On one hand, you have the Street Fighter way of making games, where every Street Fighter game has a pretty different roster, a different art style, different mechanics, a different feel. You know, Capcom will willingly sell you Street Fighter 2, 3, 4, 5, all alongside each other because each one is a different kind of experience. And also as a result, fans will stick with one and be a favorite, have a favorite entry that they've mastered. Tekken is much more iterative, where every Tekken game is designed to replace the old one. You know, you can't go on Steam and buy the old Tekken games updated with rollback netcode because probably the way that Namco thinks is that Tekken 7 is the ultimate Tekken. It's got every character that was in the previous ones, more or less. Massive move lists. Learning Tekken is a much trickier thing to do than learning Street Fighter. However, there is also legacy knowledge, where Capcom will mix it up after every game and you'll have to relearn Street Fighter. Once you know how to play Tekken, if you know how to play Paul, we're seeing footage of Paul here. If you know how to play Paul in like Tekken, Tekken 1, Tekken 2, okay, maybe he learned some moves across the entries, but for the most part, you can kind of keep playing that character, pick that character up in the newest Tekken. However, it says that they're changing a lot of things because now you have the service game model where Tekken 7 has been updated for years and years. It's basically gotten multiple Tekkens worth of content as updates. So you have to offer players something a little different in order to get them to leave Tekken 7. So I think Tekken 8 actually has to strike this balance now where it has to keep the Tekken essence, but change enough that people want to jump over to Tekken 8 and actually leave Tekken 7.
Interesting. So you think you equate this essentially to the live service elements of these games now, because I think Tekken, as you say, it's very iterative and has been for years, but I think really slowly but surely, I think they've been moving towards more exploring different systems, a bit more special moves. How they started with them, they made them a bit more flashy, then they made them a bit more being able to do the special moves at the same time and kind of clash together. And now they have even more systems of dashing in, of using these gauges. So I don't know why they're doing that. Maybe they felt that it was getting a bit stale. Maybe you're right, and they saw Tekken as more of a service now, so they had to like innovate and update and be updated with times. Whatever the reason is, Tekken 8 is going to be, I feel like, a pretty big departure. And the way you mentioned that, someone who played all the Tekkens up to now, even playing up to Tekken 7, I think Tekken 8 is going to be something they will have to learn quite a bit from scratch.
Yeah, I like that they're shaking it up a bit. I get the impression that the characters will play the same, but there will be these universal mechanics that will shake the game up a little bit. I imagine it's a really tough act to balance, and even like I only briefly checked at this video because I just kind of got the impression that, I mean, with a fighting game you can introduce a new mechanic and it could be a brilliant mechanic, but if it's not perfectly tuned just right, it can make or break the entire experience. So to some extent, they could talk about this all day, but I really have to have a controller in my hands to see how it feels. That said, while Street Fighter has taken a more risky approach with every entry, and they don't always knock it out of the park, Tekken's known for landing it pretty much every time. Now they're shaking it up a bit here, but I'd like to hope that I have faith in them that they'll pull all these changes off. I'm excited that they're shaking up the formula. And while we're at it, just because Tekken is iterative, I think that they need to put the old Tekkens out digitally. Why not? For preservation's sake, put them out with rollback netcode. There are a lot of
Yeah.
people who love specifically, Tekken 3 or specifically Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection. They should keep those games around.
Let it be known that I completely disagree with Ian on all Tekkens are great because Tekken 4 exists.
Hey,
So there's that.
I, I I love the art style and the music and the atmosphere of Tekken 4.
Oh man, I
It
like
is
nothing in that.
it is buggy. It is buggy and it's a little too slow. But well, again, I mean, there's an example of them taking a chance and not getting it right, and maybe that's why they've played it fairly conservatively up until now.
Maybe, but also I feel like maybe that was definitely not a time to take those chances that they did with Tekken 4. I think now the time is right for sure. Um, to release Tekken 8 and be exactly like Tekken 7, I think that would not fly with most people nowadays. So I think there's also an element of that. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
definitely they should release other Tekkens on digital platforms for sure. Cool. I think that's it for main news from us. There's a couple of things I want to bring up before we move to the next section. First of all, last time I mentioned, I talked about kind of how level designers work with artists, and kind of when I was editing the episode, I had a bit of more think about that and just wanted to clarify some of the points I made. There's really no one way to make games nowadays, especially nowadays. Level designer working with environment artist, and them and each doing their own work was something that I am used to, but that's definitely not the only way to do things nowadays. The games are being made in many different ways, especially if you look at indie scene. Sometimes there's a solo developers or very small teams. Often they'll have to uh, juggle a lot of responsibilities. So it's definitely possible to make a game and combine these disciplines together. That was just my experience of how I am used to working, and there's definitely not only one way to do things. And to that point, recently there was a blog post by BioWare about how their designers work. I'm going to link in the show notes. It was a community update, and I encourage everyone to read if they're interested in to see how different studios approach work between different departments. So in this case, I'm just going to summarize this in general. Uh, this was about how their game design team works with their UI team. Essentially, they kind of combine them both together, and they work really closely in designing the systems. This specific blog post, it was about the next Dragon Age game, but it's interesting to see how closely in that studio these two disciplines work together. They're almost like a one team. Whereas in Rebellion, for example, the way we work, the UI team is quite a separate department, and there is some crossover for sure. But for the most part, the design team works on their own bits, and then when we need to, we kind of work together, but then go our separate ways again to work on our own bits. Whilst in BioWare, it looks like the UI and the design team they work really close together and design these systems from ground up. I guess they want to make sure that the visuals and the design systems tell the same, kind of like have the same cohesive language.
I think in BioWare's case, I mean, RPGs are known for being, they had a history of being quite complex. And I think one thing that BioWare nailed with, like, say, the Mass Effect series that really struck a chord with a greater crowd that didn't normally play RPGs. And I wonder if BioWare, I get the impression that they really prioritize making RPGs easy to pick up and play and enjoy. And so I'm not surprised that they keep UI in the loop all the time with design. I love that I love that different studios handle things in different ways. Nobody should make games the same as somebody else.
Yeah, that's true. And BioWare in general famously completely overhauled the UI for Dragon Age 2. Now, I personally like the UI of the Origins. I think it had a personality. I think it had like a throwback to old school RPGs. The Dragon Age 2, for me personally, the UI experience was way too modern. I think it was almost skewed more towards console players. Fair enough. So I don't. I'm not sure what their plan is for next Dragon Age. I doubt they're going to go back to the origins. But I think this blog post is not entirely about the visual elements. It's more about how the systems work, and how UI and design keep each other in check in terms of the process of designing both the abilities and the skill trees, for example, and how they're represented on screen. So it's a very interesting blog post. I encourage everyone to read about this, and I'm going to link it in the show notes. Cool. And last bit before we move on to playing the games. It's interesting. Last episode, I mentioned I was playing Black Mesa, and one thing that stood out for me was that they had these really long and large corridors, and sometimes there were sections of game where nothing really happens. You just kind of walking around, and just so it happens, there's an article on Rock Paper Shotgun that where they sat down and interviewed Mark Laidlaw, who in 2017 posted something on his website that showed his early work on potential episode 3 script. Mark Laidlaw then retired from Valve, and today, what he's saying today is that he kind of regrets making that public, which is fair enough, because in development, something that's really early is not indicative of the released product at all. You can have something really well written or almost done, but if it doesn't get to the game, if it doesn't get to the final release, it just doesn't really count. There's many reasons why that happens, and I think Mark realized that years later, and I think I agree with him when he says that he literally says he was deranged when he released that.
I think the fans were looking for some kind of resolution, and maybe he felt like Valve was moving away from that story. But then I have not played Half-Life Alyx, but I get the impression that it opens up some sort of future plot in the series. It's leading into to whatever Valve has planned for, what would come after Half-Life 2 Episode 2. And maybe he feels like fans are now comparing Valve's story to his essentially fan fiction now. I guess we call it a fan fiction if he's not working on Half-Life anymore, but fans will be judging his concept for a story versus whatever Valve makes next. And that's a tricky place to be in, because fans can now just, sit back and imagine, surely they can pull this off. And maybe in practice they couldn't. Maybe in practice that story would be simplified. I mean, stories in games almost never go according to plan,
Yeah, exactly. Like having some sort of early draft, and then come out and say, well, I had this already, and they just didn't allow me to use it is very disingenuous, I think. And I'm happy that Mark realized this years later, because, again, to reiterate, there's many reasons why things may end up not being part of the game. And often it's not because someone was out there to get you or your work. A lot of reasons for things getting cut. That's just part of the development. But what I wanted to highlight in this interview was actually, I'm going to do a quote here. It's a quote from the article, it has a quote from Mark. So, really good level design tells its own story. You don't need NPCs stopping to tell you what to do if your visual grammar is clear enough. Then, when characters do pop up, they can say lines of dialogue that make them feel like characters instead of signposts. It's this approach that resulted in Half-Life's trademark flow and perfect pacing, as well as a lot of black comedy in which scientists were pulled into vents and belched out again in pieces. Half-Life's continuous and consistent fiction left you with the sense you were passing through a cross-section of larger world, rather than a set of fairly narrow levels. Nowhere was this more keenly felt than in its famous opening train ride into the bowels of Gordon Freeman's unorthodox and intimidating workplace. That came about when Laidlaw and level designer Brett Johnson decided to fix up some of the later's ruined lab areas and bring them to the rest of the team. It solved the problem of how to start the game, Laidlaw say. The plan up to that point had been to start immediately after the disaster and smoke cleared. But after all the work of building broken levels, it seemed like a waste not to get more use out of them. Then we just worked backwards from there and flesh out the preceding events. These were all economical ways of doing storytelling with the architecture, which was my whole obsession. The narrative had to be baked into the corridors. The narrative had to be baked into the corridors. This is such a good quote. Um,
I think it's funny that people say that they love Half Life's story. I mean, I do think it has a great story, yet I wouldn't call it a story driven game. I think what makes it great is that the writers are willing to work with design,
yeah,
willing to work with everybody to make the game and just pull out the best thing that they can, even if the story, it isn't like the game is constantly giving you a really complex tale of characters and setting and things. It does its job.
yeah, exactly. Like what he says here, your visual grammar. If your visual grammar is clear, you're good. Then, your corridors will tell the story. Somewhere later in the blog, in the interview, he even calls the NPCs in the first game like primordial. They were not characters. They were just like moving moving objects, moving stick figures that kind of were moving around and while you were exploring the environment. So back then, to have a really clear visual grammar and tell stories with environments was key, right? And they pulled it off. So I felt that was very interesting. I think if you are into level design specifically and struggling how to, maybe if you're making something that doesn't have a lot of NPCs, maybe if you're making something that doesn't really have a lot of story, extravagant story, cutscenes, or dialogue, looking at what Half-Life did is a good way to learn how to approach that kind of problem. I'll link this interview in the show notes as well. All right, I think that's we're done with the news. And do you have anything else?
Nope, that's all.
All right, cool. I think we'll take a quick break and we'll be back for the main games. And just as a reminder, we're playing today Jedi Last Order and the Snatcher.
Snatcher, yeah.
See you in a bit, guys. Right, so we're gonna start with Snatcher. Now, Ian, tell me about Snatcher.
Yes, Snatcher released in late 80s, 89 or so, by Konami, directed by Hideo Kojima. A lot of the people who went to work on Metal Gear Solid, of course. Kojima did this after the first Metal Gear on the MSX. So this also came out on personal computers only in Japan. And then this version is the Sega CD version that came out around 94 or so. I don't actually think they released this version in Japan, but this version has redrawn graphics and full voice acting. So it's considered to be the best version of the bunch, anyway.
Yeah, it's worth to mention that we decided to change the format slightly. Instead of playing the games first and then talking about them afterwards with footage on top, we're going to play the game and talk about them at the same time. And we'll see how that goes. So something new that I decided to try. But I think it will help us to kind of have a richer discussion about the title. because we don't need to rely on us remembering what we played really. So
Yeah.
Snatcher is something I actually knew about. When you mentioned it the first time, I didn't recognize the name, but then once I started preparing for the episode, I realized I did know about this game. I've never played it, but I read about it. And first thing, of course, you read about this game is that it has had a lot of extensive censorship. Now, I am passionately anti-censorship of any kind, books, movies, games, you name it. So I was trying to make sure that we play the most uncensored version. Unfortunately, that is not an option for us. It's only in Japanese. This one is the Sega CD, like Ian mentioned, and this has a few things changed. The class is not the first game that has censorship, but it's just, this is another case of it being very, I don't know, funny. Like, you will have face blown off, people being decapitated, but at the same time they really made sure to cover that nipple in certain scenarios. So it is what it is.
Some of the gore, actually, you might get to see some of the gore that was censored in this, actually.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other anecdotes of that was that they had to remove some of the licensed characters in certain situations. I think this game had like alien in the background, and even the actual snatchers themselves, the design had to be adjusted because it was resembling the Terminator way too much. Obviously, Kojima was inspired
It still kind of does.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it still does. Obviously, it was inspired by Blade Runner and Terminator, all the movies of that time.
Konami.
I feel like the Junker is a bit of a weird.
It's a Sega logo.
A weird name for these. Why don't you just name them Hunters?
Doesn't sound original enough.
I guess. Junker sounds like somebody who just goes to the junkyard and looks for things.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a visual novel style adventure type game. I know that there's some action later on. I'm not sure if we're going to get to that in 1 hour that we have. But hopefully we will. So you can look around, you can investigate, and you can enter. And immediately, I think when you choose investigate and I think it was look at the front operator. She's a beautiful Oriental woman. There's definitely a Kojima flavor in this game. You can
already tell.
The first thing you can do when talking to the secretary here is flirt with her, and that immediately reminded me of Snake flirting with May in the Metal Gear. Now, I'm not saying that. First of all, this is from the game from the 80s, right? But also, I'm not saying that this needs to be removed from all games, or this is like 2023 and we need to be PC all the time. But I feel like just looking at this in a vacuum, it's slightly jarring. Like this whole tone of the game, snatchers are killing people. Snatchers are essentially robots that pretend to be humans, wear human skin, and they just randomly kill people. So you're sent here to investigate and join this team of snatcher hunters. And you also have amnesia. Your wife has amnesia. You're divorced, and with all of that, having him to just flirt with the secretary is so like just out of place.
Now, I will say, this game is definitely a product of its time. The PC platforms that it originally came out on, I think they were known for a lot of erotic games. So a lot of titles would be things like Mahjong, but for every title that or every round that you win, you'd strip a woman naked, that kind of thing. So I'm not sure if maybe the team or Konami felt pressure to include those kinds of aspects, because it is really blatantly in your face, just tonally all over the place with regards to that. And Kojima's next game, Policenauts, another adventure game for the same platform, has the same kind of stuff as well. You can fondle the boobs of any woman that you meet in that game, basically. It's just so out of place that it's like a parody of itself.
Yeah, I think it can be done probably better than it was done here, and probably Metal Gear as well. Let it be known that erotic games are a thing today for sure, and in fact, I play some of them. One of the games I actually will talk about in one of the episodes, but I just this game, does it have a dating element? Of course not. You cannot date this woman, right? It's just you could just like dry flirt with her and kind of come off as a creep.
Gillian's definitely a bit of a creep.
One thing I noticed is that you can ask them the same thing more than once, and they have response to that, which I like.
So you're going to get very used to that in this game. One of the design pitfalls of Snatcher, really the make or break, I think, for people who want to get into this game, is oftentimes you have to perform the same action multiple times to progress things. I remember there's a bit where you have to go inside someone's apartment, and there's a room of you standing in front of their door, and you can hear something. And I remember just standing there for like 5 minutes trying every look, every investigate, every use verb multiple times, getting slightly different responses, not even sure if you're on the right track, or if, if you try this one the fourth time, now you can proceed.
Yeah. So there's quite a lot of options here. You can look around, you can investigate. I feel like sometimes, though, they're kind of like maybe they could have been the same thing. Like investigate and look feels like the same thing, because you look at a plate or like a camera and he just talks about it, I guess.
Yeah, one is slightly higher fidelity, but it isn't particularly clear, the distinction.
Yeah.
One thing that feels like a hallmark of Kojima's games is his micro fascinations with things. When this game being an adventure game, it lets you examine just every facet of posters, of couches, and your character will tell you things like, oh, it's a regular cigarette. Of course, in the future, cigarettes have been done like this, and it's because the government passed this order in this year. And it feels reminiscent of the codec calls in Metal Gear, where if you want, you can talk to weapons advisors and learn all kinds of obsessive details about how combat worked in the Cold War, or how DNA encoded weapons work in the future, that kind of thing. That feels like a very Kojima thing to me.
Yeah, I appreciate that, actually. I always like that level of detail and attention to detail from his games.
What did you think of that opening cutscene?
It's nice. It definitely immediately reminds me of Blade Runner, straight up. That cityscape, cars flying around. Sometimes I think Kojima is very on the nose with his references, but I still liked it. I think this is I kind of played a bit before we start recording. I think this is an interesting kind of point here where it has a lot of options, but I think no matter what you choose, it's still gonna force you to go to the chief's office.
I think you can go to any of them, but only one is going to move the plot forward.
The chief?
Yes, our big boss here at Junker headquarters. That's his office right over there.
There you go.
Even though this Sega CD version came out 5 years after the base version, I can only imagine that it would have been pretty mind-blowing to watch that opening cutscene in like 94. As a Sega CD, Sega Genesis owner, up until now you had been playing, maybe Shining Force, but with a peak of narrative, but there's no voice acting, no cinematic cutscenes, no intro credits roll like that.
Yeah. I mean, even back then, Kojima wanted specifically to have this cinematic experience as much as he could, and as much as the technology would allow him to. By the way, can we enable subtitles for these VO bits?
Nope.
Oh.
Unfortunately not.
All right. So, Gillian is your main character, and straight away, he has amnesia and his wife has amnesia. Look, I'm not gonna... I don't want to predict and say that they are snatchers themselves, which is really easy. I want to at least have a cold illusion of kind of like surprised when it does or doesn't happen, but it's immediately sus that he's like that, and very sus.
I will tell you that the mystery of that is far more interesting.
Oh, okay.
Than that.
All right, let's investigate the chief. How do I know? That's what a Snatcher would say. There you go. Ask him about the staff.
Yeah, I actually don't think that the original releases of this game had voice acting. I think it was only the Sega CD version, possibly.
Yeah, it didn't have it. The original didn't have it.
So in a lot of ways, we kind of got the definitive version.
Well, that's interesting. So there's only 5 of them in the entire department of the Junkers. That doesn't sound enough at all. So, is it ever explained where the Snatchers came from? Surely someone had to make the first one.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
By the way, this game is quite short. It's only maybe like 5 or 7 hours long.
I guess depends how much of a fast reader you are.
And how long it takes you to guess the same verb multiple times to progress things forward.
Well, I wish they would show what that picture is. Or is that the one of the flower?
Seems so.
On the wall. Okay.
You know, I kind of wish they did more with the presentation here. The game clearly can have these big full screen portraits, so I kind of wish we had like borders around the window.
Yeah. I mean,
more going on with the fonts and that kind of thing.
So Neo Kobe is a man-made island of Japan, and is walled off currently because of the Snatcher problem. That's another thing that's not really immediately clear to you. It's not this problem is not spread throughout the whole Japan, just in this island, the way I understand it. I did ask him. Or didn't I? Alright. My job is to get those Snatchers. Got it. So the Navigator robot, that's the Metal Gear, isn't it?
Yeah, have you gotten him yet?
No.
Yeah, pick it up from him.
Alright, so let's go and pick it up then. Nope, he's not done talking.
He's not done talking yet.
Okay. Staff?
Then you have to ask him about more things.
Let's ask about our girlfriend.
Beautiful and talented. Comes on too strong? I think Gillian comes on too strong.
Oh man, everyone's coming on too strong. Oh, Chief. Well, there's some other people there. So we've got Mika, we've got Gibson. Who's Gibson? Runner. Who's the runner? What's a runner? Are they like junkers as well?
I think so, yeah. A specific role of junker?
I guess.
Maybe? It's been a long time since I played this game, unfortunately. I actually played it on the Sega CD.
I feel like it's really hard to. Well, maybe it's not hard, but like, obviously, the Snatchers look like humans, right? But underneath that skin, still a robot. So you will know if you kill the Snatcher, you've killed the Snatcher, not a human.
Good point.
Okay, I think we've asked all of the stuff. Can we go now?
I don't think
Nope.
so. Nope.
All right.
There's probably one thing in this menu that you haven't clicked enough on yet. About other?
Jordan. What is that?
Ask about Jordan.
All right. Ask about Jordan. Wait, ask about Snatchers. Okay, so they appeared 3 years ago suddenly. All right.
That should be enough to make your duties as a junker quite clear. This is your junker ID card. It will identify you as a junker. Carrying it allows you to exercise your special authority.
I see. Sort of like a police officer's badge, huh?
And here's some money. It's not much, but you'll need it to carry out your investigation.
Cash?
Credit cards aren't accepted in some regions of the city. You'll need this sooner or later.
Sounds like it's a rough place out there.
Go see Harry, the engineer. He's got your equipment ready for you.
So this possessions menu, is that kind of like your inventory and you can show things from there?
Yes.
I'll show him my cash. Look at this cash. I like how they call you out on your repeated or just like things that don't make sense to them. Okay. All right, let's go and talk to, what was it? Somebody.
Engineering. I
Engineering,
believe.
yeah. Oh, I like that poster. All right. Let's look at her face. Man. Haha. I think it was actually a computer room that we need to go. Ask about computers. Jordan is the computer.
I remember reading once that Kojima said when he was making his previous games that he would ask his team to do one thing or another thing, but whenever you ask somebody to do something, they would come back with their own spin on things, which is obviously not what this auteur director wants. So he decided if his next two games be adventure games, and he had the coders create a scripting language, probably similar to something like Lua these days, create a scripting language for him to work with so that he could implement a lot of the content in these games by himself.
fair enough. You know, it just depends on how the team kind of works together, right? Like as long as everyone's communicating their purpose and how they want things done, that you know, should be fine, really. Sometimes you want specific things done. Sometimes you want to let other people do their magic.
Yeah, I've heard anecdotes of, yeah. See, everybody's got an opinion about Kojima and the way that he works, and I've heard anecdotes of him being open to changing things based on other people's input. So I think it's really hard to judge. You know, is he a madman? Is he a genius? Is he, you know, probably somewhere well in between.
Yeah. I most of the time I'm definitely for people that, you know, for the idea that people with the kind of the idea of a game, they should be let they should be allowed to execute that dream. And oftentimes when a game is designed by committee, kind of that feel, it kind of loses something personal. I think
You've got to have respect for somebody putting out something who consistently puts out stuff that is just you know, very, very unique, very different than what other people are doing.
Yeah. For better or worse, I would rather him be allowed to do his thing and sometimes fail than kind of bend the knee and you know, probably that's why he left Konami and did his own thing. All right, I think might as well use the Jordan.
I believe you could actually search Kojima in here and get a message from him.
Yeah, let's try that then. Do we put his full name?
Yeah, what was the they just gave you the protocol. Was it one word that you had to put in?
I don't know. Let's try this. Okay, let's try Kojima.
Just put in Kojima.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah, you got him. Yeah. Personality, family man.
Nickname Ojama.
Ojama.
Never
heard that one.
I've never heard of that one.
Beautiful.
Oh god, there's a lot. Let's just let's look at the Snatchers. Distinguishing
Game
feature.
really front loads you with a lot of side information.
So they operate almost exclusively at night and during the winter months. I have a feeling that this game will only take place at night, by the way. Snatchers only snatch VIPs. Okay. So like a bum is safe. Okay. Fair enough. All right, some quality info there. Neo Kobe.
It's just we need to proceed. Or are you just messing around?
Oh well, if you know what we need, then maybe we should just.
I think you need to search. Do you need to search a specific employee, or I think they just give you this and you don't have to partake.
So do we? Okay, so this is not at all needed.
I could be wrong.
Do we have a name we can search for?
I think if you just go to quit ID file.
Let's look up our let's stalk the Mika a bit more. I'm surprised there's no 3 sizes here. Oh, this got dark. All right. I guess we can always come back here and have a read or like reference some things if we need to. Does this game have kind of like investigation elements where you need to like figure something out and you need to like really investigate?
It's a bit more like this, where you need to interact with the right kind of thing to proceed. So you can't just go to the engineering area?
We've just been there, right?
Ask her about, I don't know. Yeah, ask her about a bunch of things here and see.
I'll get a Big John. So if, let's say this Gibson, right? His wife was killed by a Snatcher. Does that mean that there's his wife, the Snatcher, somewhere out there walking around?
Was his wife killed? Oh, this guy's.
Yeah.
Someone else's.
So, you know what I mean? Like, the only way this works for Snatchers is if they kill somebody unnoticed, take their skin, and assume their position, right? Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's like...
So I think you just need to go to the shooting range now. They just kind of want to introduce you to the different areas of this facility, because you return to this area a few times throughout the game.
Okay. Oh, God.
Bit of an unconventional system.
Yeah.
Now the Sega CD version actually supports the I want to say it was the Justifier, was the Konami light gun for that console. Konami released a couple light gun games for the system, like Lethal Enforcers, and you can actually plug it in and use it when you play this game.
Oh, that's cool.
Proper shooting experience. Oh, that's a grammar error.
Oh, is there?
The wrong your.
All right.
Anyway, I think you can go to engineering now.
We need to look at her face.
What a weird thing to have her say.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at her so you can read her mind or something?
Yes. Maybe she just said it out loud. All right. Ask something, maybe? Okay. I think we're good. So we need to see Harry. Was he in engineering?
I think so.
But
yeah.
we've been to engineering.
But last time he wasn't there because you hadn't spoken to the
Ah.
chief yet. And now you can go, you know, just by coincidence, now he's shown up.
So detective's room, is that my room then?
I don't know if that's your room. Oh, let's head to some other room first. So
Yeah.
maybe now you do have to go to the detective room.
What's the point in having a junker is already a name, right? But then you also call them runners. That's a bit weird. So this catastrophe she's referring to is another thing I kind of read online. I guess there was like, what was it, nuclear explosion or something like that in the world, or just a war, and like a lot of this is definitely a dystopian kind of situation where a lot of people died, and it's like post-apocalyptic almost.
Yeah, kind of light post-apocalypse. Now you might be able to go. He might be back. Assuming you've been to everywhere else. Oh, there you go.
Oh, good. Harry's back.
Great to meet you. You're Gillian Seed, right? Haven't we met somewhere before?
No, I don't believe so.
Really? I guess I must be imagining things.
You aren't. You probably aren't. What, did he just try to undress this man? This reminds me of posters in Metal Gear. Another Kojima favorite.
Oh, that's right. Don't panic yourself. I got it right over here. This is your blaster, the official weapon of a junker. It's got full user feedback circuitry, adjusting itself to your reaction time. In other words, it's just as good as you are. What do you think? Here, see how she feels.
It's unbelievably light.
You bet it is. This ain't one of those ray guns.
Gillian's face looks a little weird there. He's got like a little boy's face.
Together with the
Yes.
latest carbon polymers and ceramics, not affected by heat one bit. And her ergonomic design optimizes both functionality and firepower. Well, what do you think, Gillian?
I'll take it.
I'll take it. Like he's bargaining. Like he, like it's a
Yeah.
shop. You're not
No,
buying it.
I kind of like that line.
I'll take it.
I'll take it.
Let's talk about Snatchers. I'm sorry, what? So what he's saying here is that none of these government people have ever been able to just have one Snatcher.
Because they can self-destruct.
Okay, but sure. Okay, let's go with that. Okay, I think we're done with this guy here. These possessions, how often does it used?
Possessions? It's used
Yeah.
pretty frequently.
Okay.
I think Sarah have something else to give you too. You gotta ask him about something.
Hmm.
I know. All right, allow me to introduce the Navigator, which I designed especially for you. Hey, Metal Gear, get out here.
So Metal Gear 1 was out by the time
Yeah.
this game came out. Maybe even Metal Gear 2.
No, not yet.
I'll look at it.
I think it came out a couple of years after this.
Yes, sir. Pleased to meet you, Gillian. I am Metal Gear Mach 2. I am programmed to be your personal assistant.
Metal Gear? That's a pretty weird name.
Oh, he's cute.
Thank you.
I think he's turning red. I took his basic design and his name from the Metal Gear menace of the late 20th century. But quite unlike that Metal Gear, this one was designed for peaceful purposes.
Oh, so this guy just confirmed that this is the same universe as Metal Gear.
I wouldn't think about it too much.
Yeah,
I
probably
think the
not.
Metal Gear timeline has expanded well beyond Snatcher.
All right. And let's investigate Metal Gear. It's still not quite clear what's the purpose of this. I mean, obviously, if this was an action game, I wouldn't worry too much. But in the case of this, story-driven adventure type of game, it's not clear what the actual use of this is going to be in practically.
Of the Metal Gear.
Yeah.
Oh, quite a bit. He's your buddy, so he and Gillian kind of play off each other throughout the story.
Right.
All the time in dialogue. Another wrong instance of yore. They must not have had a lot of time. This is the 90s. They probably had like a couple weeks to translate hundreds of pages of script.
No, yeah, I can't fault translators of that time for sure.
In fact, I think this is translated by Jeremy Blostein, who translated MGS1, which is a legendary adaptation of the source material.
Nice.
I think he was kind of Konami's main guy at the time.
you know, this definitely falls into that trap of this future and nobody has a phone, and you have to
Yeah.
rely on this like bulky walking robot just to have like a video call.
I have a video phone call from Jean-Jacques Gibson coming in. Connecting.
Junker HQ, this is Gibson. I've cornered a probable male snatcher. I'm in the abandoned factory in the M district. Request immediate backup.
Gillian, that means you. You better head out right away. Jean needs your help.
We must hurry. We'll use a turbocycle to travel to the scene.
Be careful, Gillian.
Nice, let's go. Turbo cycle.
This is a turbocycle.
Turbocycle makes me think like a motorcycle.
Yeah.
This is definitely more like a flying car.
I was gonna say, is that a turbo cycle?
It is also VTOL capable, so takeoffs and landings in narrow areas present no difficulty.
A flying tricycle, huh? I just came in on one of these things.
We have been assigned this vehicle for use in our investigations.
I can't look at Mika's face anymore.
Yeah, he's your main lane.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is pacing wise, it seems weird to have all these options to just, you know, Gillian's just standing in front of this thing
Yeah.
with his hands in his pockets, and he's thinking about it, and he's looking at everything around him, and he's chatting with Metal Gear, and now he's going to get in the car.
So
There's a
now,
lot of moments.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you can exit it, right? Like if I exit, okay,
Oh, he's not ready yet. Can you go to his house? Will it let you? Okay, good.
cool.
So when I put this on Sega CD, while this animation is going, the console is checking the disc.
Hmm.
I had it freeze a couple times on me.
My first day on the job, and now this. Ace Junker Gibson has cornered a suspected snatcher. I wonder if this guy really is a snatcher. Guess I'll find out now if all that training really paid off.
But it's unclear how you determine who's a snatcher, though. Like, how do you even tell?
You're gonna see, I guess.
I guess. At certain level, I appreciate these kind of options, even though they're like empty. But you know, they add flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, don't use that. Actually, let's use that to call him. Is he still alive? Snow 9. What is that? Okay. Motion detector. I think this also reminds me, these kind of just the art style in general reminds me of Streets of Rage.
Interesting. Because it's a Genesis Mega Drive game, similar kind of palette restrictions.
Yeah, maybe.
I love the look of. I love my Sega Genesis, all those Genesis games. Streets of Rage 2, such a good game.
Yeah.
Did you play Streets of Rage 4?
Oh no, haven't played that.
Oh, maybe we talked about this.
Yeah, you said you wanted to make me play that, but have you actually finished it yourself?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
very
okay.
good.
Well, maybe we can then do like a co-op of that.
Maybe.
Oh, Jillian.
Gillian?
Gillian?
Gillian.
Gillian, yeah. I feel like sometimes right now, for example, I know that I need to, go through specific actions before it lets me go inside. But maybe it just should let me go inside straight away. You know what I mean? Like there's like a sense of urgency right now, but instead I have to like, find my way through these menus, and only then they will allow me to enter, which is a bit odd.
I can kind of see what they're going for by having consistency, that you always have the same consistent verbs and then you pick subcategories, but I think that restricts them too much.
Yeah.
Gillian, please use extreme caution. I read multiple moving objects within the factory. This could indicate the presence of Snatchers or Insectors.
Insectors? What in the world's that?
A spider-like robot used by Snatchers as security devices. Though compact in size, they are armed with needle guns. Use extreme caution.
Do you think Gillian would have known that already based on his training?
In fairness, thinking about adventure games at the time, this came out like 88 or so. I do think I think the design of adventure games really evolved pretty rapidly around that time. Like I don't know if you've ever played LucasArts adventure games or Sierra adventure games, but when you think of the first Secret of Monkey Island, you have to select a verb and then select the object in the world that you want to interact with. So first you're choosing what you're going to look at, and then you're going to click on the thing that you want to look at. And I think over time, games tended to favor the opposite approach, where you click on the thing that you want to interact with first, and then you decide whether you want to look at it or interact with it, something like that. But at the time, maybe this was the prevalent way of thinking.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't played a lot of that type of games. I think my earliest ones were probably Leisure Suit Larry. And those ones, I don't remember. I think you just point and click and stuff like that. They weren't really that deep.
Depends on the entry, I suppose. They made a lot of them, didn't they?
Yeah.
What the?
Little John? Yes, Jean-Jacques Gibson's personal navigator.
I do think this is a cool little trick where they're having you slowly advance forward. They keep giving you opportunities to examine everything around you and see if there's anything around.
Yeah, I was gonna say the move here adds quite a bit, actually. Like that is the thing that kind of allows you to use these different options in like, even though there's usually nothing there or you can't hear anything, but just because you move to a different location, you are encouraged to use them again and don't feel like you're just drowning in these menus.
You think they would just move you over there automatically,
Yeah.
right?
Oh shit!
So I think this was slightly censored in the Sega CD version. I think it's actually gorier in the Japanese version. Which is interesting because don't the Japanese have something about decapitation? Something being very taboo about that. So I'm assuming this is really intended to shock you. Even for today, this is kind of shock. I mean, imagine like 94 or so. But this feels especially more brutal than at least Mortal Kombat was at the time.
Yeah, I think this one in particular
more realistic.
ended up being a bit less censored. I think I read something about this somehow kind of surviving more or less gory.
If he died instantly, then could he have screamed?
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's okay, so
You gotta do more with the body.
okay, I got the key.
There might be more. There's usually more.
Okay, I think
I think you still investigate something. Investigate the corpse. Yeah, and they need to investigate it again to know what it is. Maybe they could have just kept that in one.
yeah,
I'm not sure. Like, what do you think their thinking was breaking these up into as small bits as you can?
I think they wanted to include like gameplay, but they could have added some visual cues. Let's say, all these things like a key on the floor, a note in the pocket visible, and then something in his hand. And each time you take these, let's say you take the key, it disappears from the screen. You take the note, it's gone. And then the only thing that's left is, his right hand with something in it. Just something visual for you to kind of like, instead of like getting lost in these menus.
Maybe there's the worry as well that if you were to just investigate this guy and then there was multiple lines of dialogue, I found this, I found this, I found this. Maybe they felt that would get repetitive and also that would take control away from the player too much. And that by breaking this up more, that they're keeping you in control. to make as many decisions as possible.
Yeah, look, in the end, hindsight 2020, this was, late 80s. Since then, a lot of other games did a lot of other things, and there's, you could have done a lot of things for sure, and especially today. I'm sure if Kojima made this game today, this would have been quite tight, and you wouldn't be drowning in menus or confused where to go. But it is what it is. It has, it's a product of its time, and we have to look at it that way.
Now analyzing recovered hair sample. Analysis complete. Results on the display. 1. Chromosomal analysis of cells from the papilla and root reveal 46XY. Subject is male. 2. Hair color, brown. Hair structure reading of 65 indicates European subject, wavy hair. 3. Attachment of root structure and thickness of the base of the strand suggest hair was pulled out of follicle. 4. Enzyme antibody analysis indicates subject is blood type A, Rh factor negative. 5. Cell component distribution indicates presence of artificial protein compounds. The results of the analysis strongly suggest that the strand of hair was pulled from the scalp of Jean's attacker during their struggle. This strand of hair almost certainly came from a male European, blood type A negative Snatcher.
Well, there you go. Surely this is all we can get here. Skin sap? Wait.
Now analyzing recovered tissue sample. Analysis complete. Results on the display. 1. Enzyme antibody analysis indicates subject is blood type O, Rh factor negative. 2. Chromosomal analysis of cells in the sample reveal 46XX. Subject is female. 3. Cell component distribution indicates presence of artificial protein compounds. 4. Number of melanocytes in sample indicates that subject is Caucasian. The results of the analysis strongly suggest that the tissue sample, a cluster of skin cells, was scraped from the subject during a struggle with Jean. These skin cells almost certainly came from a female European, blood type O negative Snatcher.
Wait, so I thought at first it said it was male. The hair was male, or was it did not say male? Ah, so there was more than one Snatcher involved. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. Oh.
So, John had an ulcer, huh?
Yes. In addition, I read a substantial quantity of partially digested organic compounds.
Organic compounds. If you can determine the composition and a degree to which the food's been digested, we may be able to figure out where Jean's been.
Are we gonna do that now? Nice, let's go.
Now making incision in Jean's
Imagine him opening that corpse up, scooping up that, stomach contents and giving to Metal Gear.
Results of the analysis indicate the organic compounds are primarily composed proteins that have been exposed to digestive acids for approximately 3 hours. Amino acid structure for proteins suggests the meat is that of a buffalo.
Buffalo meat?
Yes, buffalo meat. The results indicate that Jean ate buffalo meat somewhere about 3 hours before he was killed.
I appreciate that they remove these options here at this point. It kind of helps you to go through these.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess not all of them. There's still the blaster and stuff, but, still.
I think you just move from here. Yeah, time to leave. Oh. Oh, there might be something in Little John.
Okay.
Is that his name?
Well, come on, get his memory.
Well, what do you think? Can you get this memory chip out of there in one piece?
I will attempt it. Now retrieving memory chip. Memory chip retrieved.
You have to look at the chip. The memory chip.
Yeah, but I couldn't look at it there. Can you look at it here?
Possessions.
Oh. Investigate. Evidence. Ah. Okay. Okay.
I think you have to use Metal Gear.
Oh.
Able to leave now, or you might have to just move around a bit.
Let's try to leave, and then if that doesn't work, we'll go all the way towards the front.
Yeah.
I feel like something maybe here.
Yeah. So you got the key, the scrap of paper, the organic compounds, the hair and skin sample. You have analyzed the memory chip. Report analysis results. Oh, no, that might be the same. Key? Look at the key.
I think while I fumble here.
Now you have given it to him as evidence.
Oh, wow.
Yeesh.
Snatchers?
Unable to confirm. I suggest we investigate.
Investigate. No. Oh. Is that a bomb? Run, Gillian! I can't tell if this is Kojima humor or this is part of the actual. Come on, Gillian, lift all the rocks. Well, I guess they escaped. We suck. Huh. All right. Well.
I think you're allowed to retreat now.
Really? Like, but there's literally somewhere there, and now is when I can do it. Okay.
Turn up your TV, Serge.
Yes.
Such a Kojima thing.
Yeah. Uh. Can we move? Can wait.
I think you need to look. I don't know why you can't investigate. You have to just look.
Time bomb?
How did we miss that the first time? I think they want me to save.
Take your gun out.
Wow, I almost died there.
You took too long to draw your gun.
Yeah, I
That's kinda
forgot
cool
the
touch.
button. Yeah. Let's get the hell out of here.
What's wrong with you? Hurry it up!
I am incapable of locomotion.
What on earth are you blabbering about? Let's go! It's gonna blow! Oh, I can't believe this stupid robot! Come on! Jeez, my ears are really ringing.
That's because you left the volume turned up.
Damn snatchers.
There is no need for concern. I have stored all the information about the evidence and the area in my memory. We should return to Junker headquarters.
All right, that was cool. I think this place was a pretty good kind of self-contained
Return to Junker headquarters.
Ooh,
area of,
first day.
Now
I guess, gameplay you can call it.
It's a nicely paced. Well, it's weird to call it nicely paced. I think it's a nicely paced vertical slice.
Yeah.
It's just that the pacing of the game itself is kind of bogged down by the interaction
Perform your
system.
duties quite satisfactorily.
That's right. It's not your fault, Gillian. Don't worry about it. By the way, the chief is waiting for you.
I mean, that's just over an hour, so that's a good snippet of Snatcher.
Okay, that's good.
You made a great effort, though. I've studied the data transmitted back by Metal Gear, so I know all about what happened out there. It's too bad about Gibson. He was a great junker. Seed, I need you to take over for him. You're the only one I've got left who can battle this Snatcher menace.
Okay. All right. Well, that was Snatcher. I think it's really cool. I think, considering how old this game is, I can definitely see a lot of beginnings of Kojima here, and definitely see a lot of kind of gameplay elements that later on did other games borrowed from this. It sometimes it does get kind of get lost in the menus, and it's the classic problem of a lot of adventure visual novel games of like what do I choose, where do I go, but at the same time, once you get into that zone of investigating the area, listening to sounds, trying to kind of like do the detective work on that corpse, I think in that moment that's where it really shines, I think, this game.
Yeah, I think it works well for the slower paced detective stuff. It's interesting looking at this now. I suppose my feelings haven't really changed from when I played it about I played this about 6 years ago. It's interesting how vivid this all is in my mind. The frustrations with the interactions, I can pretty much, you would enter a certain screen and I'm like, oh, I know this is going to take him about this long to get through this area, and you're gonna get stumped at about the same spots that I did, which just shows how unintuitive this stuff is. But then also, I still think it's a pretty nicely paced little section, and there's a lot of charm despite all the warts.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the visuals and the setting, and it definitely transports you into this world pretty quickly, which I appreciate. Straight from the beginning. Obviously, you can compare this to Blade Runner. You know, you might as well replace Snatcher with what they call the what's the robots in the Blade Runner?
Replicants.
Replicants. And it's almost the same setting then, but still, I appreciate the visuals. You know, the VO and dialogue and script is hit or miss. Obviously, you need to take it for what it is. It's a product of its time, product of Kojima of that time. But I think you can definitely enjoy this game today still, for sure. And in fact, I am going to play this and finish it. I do want to. I'm interested enough to see where the story goes.
Nice.
So I want to sit down and finish this. So that was Snatcher. We'll be back in a sec for the second game, which is Jedi Last Order.
Okay, I'm about ready to start Jedi Fallen Order.
Nice. Now I'm gonna start by saying I feel like last time we talked about this game, I didn't, give it proper introduction. I guess I kind of equated it to Dark Souls, but I think it's a bit unfair. I think it does a lot of other things, unique things with gameplay. It's also very quite different from Dark Souls in many other ways. It doesn't have equipment, for example, and that's a big thing. It relies on you as a Jedi meditating and then upgrading skills. The exploration is also slightly different. So it has a lot of unique things to it. But I think the feel of combat and certain elements of the world building can be quite similar to the Souls games.
Interesting.
Oh, I forgot about this intro.
I don't want to upset your rhythm, Cal, but the boss wants a word. You'll be good for us. Here he is, Chief.
An error has been detected on line 10A. All our clamps are jammed. I need 2 workers to climb up and secure the cables.
That's not an easy maneuver.
The count will double your pay for this shift.
Come on, Cal. Well, it's our score. That couldn't hurt. Huh?
Okay.
All right. Let's go.
Get to work.
This way.
I'm right behind.
Let me adjust my audio here.
Okay, how's your video performance? It's a bit stuttery for me, but if it's fine for you, that should be fine.
It's okay for me.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously the intro VO animation cinematic is great looking.
Yeah, I mean, you throw enough money at a game, and it's gonna look good. It's gonna feel good.
Oh yeah.
It's Star Wars, so they obviously have that great world building, great setting and everything.
Yeah, so this game will start with like a linear section here, and it will continue until you get to your first planet where it opens up a bit more. So you don't need to worry about exploring too much.
Oh.
Up here.
Now, Serge, have you played Titanfall?
No, I have not. I like the idea of those games, but I was put off by the fact that it wasn't really a single player title, at least the first game.
Titanfall 2 has an excellent single player campaign.
Nice.
It's definitely worth checking out.
I'm also a bit put off by the fact that, maybe they're not really willing to go back to that franchise and just focus on Apex Legends. They recently canceled a single player game in that world, so that doesn't really, I don't know.
I think as long as Apex is popular, there's the possibility that they'll return to it. Hopefully. I don't think Titanfall 2 did the numbers that they were hoping for. Like, they want Call of Duty numbers.
Yeah, no problem. I'll improvise.
Depart this barge immediately. You are not approved trash.
Trash? Just not approved trash.
But yeah, I think these days the multiplayer people at Respawn are doing Apex, and the single player people who would have done like the Titanfall 2 campaign are on Jedi Fallen Order. I'm gonna assume.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Because there is a sequel to this coming, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so we've got a Dark Souls style dash. However, you can't dash off ledges.
No, yeah, and especially in this section, this is a lot more like something like Uncharted than Dark Souls.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting now looking back at this. This section is a lot more like Uncharted, but then once you get to a bit more open sandboxes or levels, they are a lot more like Souls.
It's clever, even some of the things they do here, like even coming up to this lip, you just know that there's going to be something on the other side because of these lights on the other side, and this kind of what do you call that? Like the bird poop effect.
Oh yeah.
On the ledge.
Yeah.
Isn't that like
Yeah. Spoiler alert, we use that as well.
we absolutely do. Yeah. I mean, I wonder where I should go. Go to the place with the bird poop on it.
Do you like this more or the Uncharted style of highlighting the ledges with like blinking light, kind of like when it shines?
Is that what Uncharted does?
Yeah, it has like this sheen on them.
I'm not crazy about either one. I think this is something that games have to do as long as they're going to pursue photorealism. If you think about like something like, I don't know, the PS1 era of graphics, or even the stuff that Nintendo might put out, those games have simplified visuals, and so you don't have to feel through all this noisy visual information that you do in a game like this. I mean, this game looks amazing, but it also means that there's just so much to look at all the time, that there's so much work that's to be done by artists and designers to make sure that players can their eyes can parse all this visual noise.
Yeah, you're so right about
It's a real challenge. Like, we face that in Sniper massively.
This is exactly what the problem we're trying to fix, and it just goes back to that, visual language, how both artists and level designers work, and if they do their job well, then you maybe end up needing a lot less of this kind of stuff. There's different ways to grab players' attention and point them towards the right way, but sometimes you just can't avoid using these bird poop things, I guess.
What do you think about this this kind of intro where everything is perfectly framed, everything is perfectly set up for you to have a very specific roller coaster experience? Because I'm kind of I'm going to change this a little bit. I'm kind of these days of the opinion that I prefer things to, I mean, obviously this is linear, obviously this is set up for me, but I prefer things actually a little less perfect, that the world doesn't feel so perfectly designed for me to jump here at just the right moment so this person can say this one line.
For me, I think if this is only for the purposes of, let's say, tutorial or intro, that's fine. If it's very consistent and in your face, I think that's where I start having a problem with it. And in this game, luckily, it keeps it to the intro and then gives you a lot more freedom to fail and explore it by yourself.
What? Okay. Oh, click right stick. Interesting. is there an in-fiction reason why this guy can do all these amazing jumps? He's not a Jedi yet, right?
No. And his Jedi-ness is, I don't remember. I feel like he gets to just be a Jedi just because. I don't remember if they specifically explain his heritage. Maybe they do. I just don't remember quite well.
Whoever flew this went down in a blaze of glory. Those Jedi. Real tragedy. Yeah, I've always said they couldn't all be traitors.
Yeah, maybe.
Guess it's just our lucky day. Empire's gonna get a lot of good material out of it. Yeah, here we are scrapping these ships from the war just so they can turn around and make new ones. What a racket, huh? All of us risking our necks for the bosses. And the pay was better back during the Republic, too.
Hey, you really should watch what you say.
Listen to me. Find us free like this, it'll be your ticket off this soggy rock.
What makes you think I want out of here?
Come on, Cal, you're a young guy. You don't end up like me. Eventually, you gotta move on and live your life. Find your destiny.
Prouf here is an interesting character.
What's that?
Prouf, this character.
Ah, Ralph.
He's interesting.
Prof, you okay?
Cal, I can't climb up.
Prof, just hang on.
Send me.
No, don't let go.
I can't hold on.
Prof, no!
Oh man.
You okay, bro?
Did you fail that?
No, I think I got it right.
Oh, okay.
Watch out, Cal.
Look out! This thing is barely flying. Hold on! Prof, you alright?
Yeah. Okay,
We gotta move. Come on.
Hell happened. What was that back there? Was that you? That was the Force, wasn't it?
Just forget what you saw, okay? Please
No,
trust me.
but I've seen the stories. I've heard it.
Prof,
Bounties out on people like you.
I know.
Yeah, we're ready. We need to be careful. Yeah.
There you go. He's hiding his horse.
It's a cool conceit that that you've got this ability that you can't use. Of course, it ties in with that time in Star Wars, which I think is relatively unmined. Maybe not so much these days, but
Yeah, it is cool. Yeah.
Cal, I've been working with you some time now. I've never seen you do anything like that before. We've been through some hell together. So, I know the risk that you took for me.
I think, less is more. This is a good example of a very lean, effective intro, narrative-wise.
I mean, it's not quite over yet though.
Yeah, I guess I suppose that a lesser game, or maybe a game that, I think if a game came out 10 years ago, they would have introduced this with a lot more cutscenes.
Yeah.
This feels very back to the Half-Life 2 era of in terms of pacing it nicely.
I don't know. I think this is a lot more inspired by Uncharted and the way that game is paced than anything else.
For sure, for sure. I guess just the fact that they're keeping you in control.
Yeah.
For a lot of it, there really aren't that many cutscenes here. It's pretty rare they've taken away control.
Oh.
I wonder how they did that trick on a technical level.
They probably detect the button press and then swap the level behind you.
Yeah, swap the map behind you. Yeah. It's something that you definitely couldn't have done even a generation ago on consoles. Just not enough memory.
Right, there you go. Now I'm remembering it. He had a master and he was an apprentice. So
Everybody up. Identification ready. Move out and line up.
Probably just another contraband inspection.
this game is gorgeous.
Yeah, it looks great. I wonder if this I didn't see anything in the settings about ray tracing, not that my card supports it, but
I mean, your card should support it. It's an RTX card.
oh yeah, it does. No, I guess this doesn't have ray tracing. Have we seen any of the sequel yet? Have they shown enough any of it?
I don't think I'm not sure if they talked about that specific part.
We seek a dangerous fugitive. This is no common anarchist, but a devotee of the treasonous Jedi Order. Failure to turn over this traitor will result in a charge of sedition. Turn yourself in, or everyone present shall face summary execution.
I think it's time someone came forward. I've been working on this heap a long time. Way before the war. We refit and rebuilt ships. Best in the galaxy. Then came the Empire. And engineers became scrappers. The workers, they just started getting worked.
Prof.
We all know the truth. We're just too afraid to say it. To the Empire, we're all just expendable.
Yes, you are.
No!
Look at this. A lightsaber.
I found the Jedi!
They don't see him yet.
Stowaway. Oh, now it looks like Uncharted. We're on a train.
Yeah.
Ah, I love it.
So I need to warn you that some of the stuff that it borrows from Souls is that it's quite unforgiving in terms of your health, and they can fuck you up if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure which difficulty you chose. I played it on the
Just
hardest.
normal.
Okay, maybe you'll be fine then. On the hardest, it was like all of these guys were pretty tough.
Nice. It's refreshing to see one of these games that is designed around a challenge.
Oh yeah.
I know every game has a hard mode, but ideally a game needs to be it's designed around a certain type of difficulty. It's nice to have something that you've obviously it's not a challenge right now, but I'm assuming at some point, even on normal, it's going to throw me for a loop.
Yeah, there's definitely moments in this game where it's not easy on any difficulty, I think.
I like what he says. Just do flips around him. Got my dodge. I'm leaving little beam marks in the ground. This is great. I liked the UI icon for switching targets. That felt really nice. I like that he says stuff too when he's doing well.
They will react to your situation. If there's like a bunch of them and you're alone health, they'll be like, oh, we almost got him. Let's push.
Nice.
If there's like one left, he's like, well, I'm fucked.
Got parries, got cinematic takedowns. Okay, so attacking enemies restores your force.
Yeah, but you're still on half health right now, so be careful.
Oh, I need to climb it. I see. That's clever. They put the object in motion, so you actually couldn't make out that it was the object that you've been trained up until now to. Nice, nice. Trying to do here. Climb? Nope. Nope. I don't go through here, right? No. Oh, I have to climb that. Okay, interesting. Oh, I have to shimmy around. See, it's not easy. Even the masters at Respawn can struggle sometimes with visual clarity.
Still, I feel like these small ways you can get kind of stopped. It's not that bad. It took you like 5 seconds to figure it out.
Yeah, of course. It's not great, but it's not ideal either. It's probably because that was dark blue / gray, and I feel like I've been trained up at this point on like bright red and orange stuff that's climbable for the most part. I mean, listeners might think, "Oh, that's me. That's on me. That's my fault." And to some extent, sure. But also as designers, you want to give players the smoothest experience.
Yep, that's why we do it. If there's a way to not take away from the environment and still not confuse players, that is definitely the way to go. Just sometimes
you'll never get it perfect, but you'd hope as many people as possible can enjoy the smoothest experience. Oh, he shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious, but let me figure it out.
I mean, this is the problem recently that's been cropping up with some of the games, right? Like God of War and even like Hogwarts Legacy. Apparently, that game spills out the solution to puzzles straight away as soon as you get there. The main character just says, "Okay, I need to do this."
You know what I think makes this opening feel lean narratively is that a ton of things have already happened in the story that they just trust in the player to understand. Maybe because it's Star Wars, but they're not explicit about the Jedi being hunted down, but it's pretty clear from that opening, right? It's pretty clear what the Force is, even if the game doesn't overtly explain it to you. And maybe it's because it's Star Wars is super popular, but I think more games should be able to get away with that, but they're too afraid to. They're too afraid that players won't understand what this thing is unless it is outright, made abundantly clear. And they waste all this time.
Well, I mean, this game, there was an interview with the VO of the main character that where he was talking about the second game, and he mentioned that with both the first and the second game, they wanted to make sure that people who don't know anything about Star Wars are still able to enjoy each game independently. Well, whether or not they achieved that, I'm not sure. I think for the most part, yes.
I think so. I mean, it's so simple. It's so obvious. They don't have to explain what the Force is for you to see it in motion and understand it.
Yeah.
But even the fact that this character is already a trained Jedi with a lightsaber and had a master, the fact that they just trust you to understand that is great.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, trying to chase some sort of independence from the general Star Wars lore is probably often is not worth or almost impossible. Like it or not, you have to kind of accept that Star Wars is so popular that probably most people will know something about it.
Yeah. I mean, you try what you can, but at the same time, Star Wars is like the premier sci-fi series. And also, this is a video game. So many gamers are, nerds who are into comic books and movies and stuff anyway. Hmm.
Oh, I just noticed that they give you your full health back for this fight.
Yeah. Red attacks, eh? Oh, right. Unblockable. Right. I'm assuming I can't win this fight. Or if you can, it's very strict. You've got to love the rival figure in video games. That feeling of like so many of the best games just out there. They start by giving you a rival character that you can't defeat yet, that has very similar abilities to your own, and they often make you fight them at the beginning and feel powerless against them, and then set up a whole adventure where you gain in strength and eventually take them on.
Yeah, there's something compelling about that.
It's something that only I mean, you could set that up in other media, but that feeling of rivalry in a video game is such a strong feeling.
I mean, they take that concept full circle in this game for sure.
Kestis. Who was that back there?
An Imperial Inquisitor. She's a Force user hunting Jedi survivors. And now that she knows who you are, she will not stop until she destroys you.
How do you know so much? And why'd you help me?
We track Imperial communications. We heard the Inquisitors were heading to Bracca. So we made our move.
Oh, yeah? And what's the bounty on Jedi these days anyway?
That's gratitude for you.
Look, I get it. You've been surviving on your own for so long that it's impossible to trust anyone. And it's what's kept you alive. But this is about something bigger than just surviving.
Like what?
Like rebuilding the Jedi Order.
You too? Anybody else?
Oh, we're not good enough for you?
I like the caption.
Captain, set a course for Bogano. In the meantime, try and relax. Go, you're safe. For now.
So another way this game is a bit different from Souls is that it's not really connected world. So from this intro, you'll go to the first planet, and each planet is kind of separate, sandboxy level.
I think I heard the devs describe it as like Metroid, Metroid games, where you visit different areas. In the sense of like, I don't know if you return to previous areas, but I think more in the sense of just the density and the amount of time that you spend per area.
I don't remember spending a lot of time returning to previous areas, maybe for a thing or two, but it's definitely not as pronounced as you would expect from a fully Metroidvania game. So we're good on time. You've done the intro. We have time to kind of explore the first planet. So there, it's a bit more like kind of open worldy, I guess. There's definitely harder enemies there, things to find, things to explore.
Play Freebird.
That's all. I wrote it. Years ago. You touch an object and witness events connected to it. You feel its history.
It's an echo in the Force from the object.
Not many Jedi have that skill.
How would you know that?
I was once a Jedi, but not anymore.
Do I know you?
No. But I knew your master, Jaro Tapal. He was a true guardian of the Republic.
He was a hero. Listen. Something happened to me during the Purge. I survived, but my connection to the Force is damaged. When I meditate, if I let my guard down, I lose control. And it's like I'm back in that moment when
You survived, Cal. And you're not alone. Not anymore.
We're coming up on our destination.
I think it's interesting that they set this character up, this Jedi, to have different basically different rules than other Jedi to support gameplay mechanics, I'm assuming.
What do you mean different rules?
He says he's losing connection to the Force.
Ah, right.
I'm assuming that ties out of the gameplay in some way.
I think maybe they simply want to tie that to the progression system where you meditate and get new skills based on skill points you get from fighting.
I think that's smart. The problem with a lot of role-playing games is that if you start at level 1 and end at level 99, then narratively it wouldn't make sense for you to already be some trained Jedi.
Yeah.
Which is I think why amnesia is such a common, one of the reasons why amnesia is such a common trope in games. But if you think in Dark Souls you start as nobody, but in The Witcher you start as Geralt, who's already the Witcher. He's a legendary monster hunter. So it wouldn't make sense for Geralt to start at level 1, right? He can only get so powerful throughout the story for it to make any sense.
Yeah.
So I think it's a smart conceit that they've set up here.
I like how they framed the temple here, your ultimate goal. But if you just stand here, you might think, well, that's the only thing I need to go. It's straight up, from A to B. But actually, there's a lot of stuff you can explore here. And you actually, I don't think you can go there straight away. You have to open a path.
Okay. If I go back inside, I'm sure I can do some stuff. But let's focus on this.
Yeah, you can't really do much stuff there yet. You can talk to the characters, but
What happens if I?
Oh, you'll die.
No, you just come back with less health.
Oh right, yeah, yeah.
The old Zelda effect. Was that Baby Yoda?
I wish.
I've not seen The Mandalorian.
Oh.
I'm very out of touch with Star Wars.
So right over there on the left, you should go and interact with the first kind of meditate point. Nope.
Oh, that's kind of easily missable.
Yeah.
Just a flat texture on the ground.
I think it has a bit of a glow.
These are save points? Interesting.
It's more like checkpoints.
Okay. What is rest? Oh, okay. Oh, so it's the bonfire system.
Yes.
Hey, BD1. I'm Cal. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm looking for someone. No, not you. I'm searching for a Jedi, I think. Hold on. You know the Jedi? What do you know? Wait, hold on. Did you just slice that? Thanks.
There you go. That's your mascot.
Can't be Star Wars without a little mascot guy designed to sell toys. Ah, well, that's a beautiful map. It's very, it's very Star Wars. It's also very Metroid Prime / Vagrant Story.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
figured it out.
In most games, I'm generally against having maps, mini maps and maps in general. Something that, for example, Steel Rising that I talked about earlier does. They don't really have maps or mini maps. They have a map, but it doesn't really show you exact map of the area. And I think ever since Souls done away with a map, I've been enjoying that kind of approach to traversing the environments and relying on players remembering their the paths they took and creating that mental image of the area in their heads.
Yeah, I think it's really important for players to build a mental map of spaces and think about spaces in a more active way, I suppose. All too often players are just following compasses and waypoints, and they don't have to use their mind. One of my favorite feelings from Yeah, the Souls games, the Tomb Raider games, the Thief games, Metroid games, Resident Evil. A lot of my favorite games, to be honest, is when you enter an area and you say, "Hang on, wait, I've been here." You know, this is a hub area or something, and you recognize that the level designers have, you know, carefully plotted things out so that you can explore the space from multiple angles, and side paths will bring you back, you know, from a new vantage point into an old area, that kind of thing. It builds a real connection with a 3D space.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens with this game, I remember when I was playing this, at some point I was consulting the map so often because I could, right? And I don't know, it's not for everyone, but I think for me personally, I think it's important to, I guess, kind of force players to have that engagement with the environment.
Now, some of those games that I mentioned do have maps. But the idea is, like in Resident Evil or Metroid, you might actually pull out the map to plan a route through the space. But that's because the game is seriously testing you of getting from, you know, one side of the world to another side of the world. I think I can probably just leave there as long as it's recognized the checkpoint.
So if you don't rest, it actually doesn't restore your health. You have to actually actively choose rest in that menu.
Yeah, I'm more thinking, does it save automatically, or do you have to rest for that?
I'm not sure, actually.
I'm really surprised the game doesn't have an autosave. This reminds me of Dead Space. Have you played Dead Space?
Yes.
When you use the
Yep.
Yeah, you know.
So this is a puzzle room, and I'm not sure if you can do this right now.
Oh.
I think you can, but there's like, you could get that chest, but then there's another thing on the ceiling somewhere you can get.
The Jedi used this place to study the sphere above. I can still feel the excitement.
Yeah, that platform over there. I think there's something there in the chest.
Yeah.
I think for that one you might need to come back later.
How would I even get out of here? I guess I can go this way. Oh, that's a nice animation. It's interesting playing a game with that John Williams style score going on the entire time. Kind of whimsical Star Wars tunes. It's totally unlike most scores you get in games. Oh, that's clever. The block function is also a light function. I like that the game is always asking you to chop things down too.
Now you see, I'm glad you found this room.
I'm guessing this is a tough guy. Oh. Oh.
I think in this, for the sake of time, you can either choose to keep exploring, continuing, but you can also choose to maybe try and take this guy on and see if you can defeat him with the time that we have left. Exploring will be this will be this, you know, just more of the same that you've already had here.
Let me try to take this guy on so I can think a little more thoughtfully about the combat system.
Yeah, this was the first enemy you find, if you find him. He's optional, I think. First enemy you find that really challenges you. It challenged me for sure. I think I got him down on my maybe like third try or fifth try.
Was it over this way?
Yeah, like on the right.
Yeah. It's interesting just to see a game. You know, you say this is like Souls, and I could definitely see that, but I guess it's more that it's kind of like half Uncharted, half Souls. I can see aspects of Metroid. I could see aspects of Ratchet and Clank in here, where you touch down on a planet and you have generally like two, three different paths you can take.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I kind of came back to that point.
Oh my god, I'm doing. Oh no, they're
Yeah,
way worse.
he definitely has its own things. Borrows from quite a number of games, but I think it's unfair to just say it's like straight up Souls clone.
It's weirdly enough, I feel like games of this kind are becoming more and more rare. A linear AAA single player game that's story focused, but also isn't afraid to be mechanically rich and give the player a challenge.
Yeah. Another thing that's interesting to compare is the Still Rising that we looked at today. How that game took Bloodborne very literally and implemented those systems almost verbatim in their game, versus this game who took some of the elements of Souls games, but then really made sure to have its own identity as well. And I think of between those two games, you can clearly see that this one is much more of a well-rounded experience.
Oh yeah. Oh, I blocked too late. Maybe. Oh man.
I like how you're very aggressive. Come on, you can do it.
So let's give it one more go. Isn't it funny how about 10 years ago everybody thought EA was the worst publisher? And these days EA is arguably one of the few third-party publishers that is putting out really high budget single player games that aren't open world.
Mm.
Like EA's got this. They've got It Takes Two, and all of those Haze-like games coming out of that basically indie team working with a huge budget. They're occasionally putting out stuff like the Dead Space remake and Mirror's Edge and things like that.
I think historically the whole thing about EA was grossly overblown in my mind, that they were like the worst.
I think we've all learned that Activision is the real problem.
the real villain.
I mean, these corporations are not your friends, but if I had to pick one, I think EA is not so bad these days. I mean, they put out stuff I care about, which is more than I can say about a lot of these companies. Okay, so he does a three string attack pattern.
Actually, so I remember, I think I went away and got the ability to heal myself before I came back here. Now I remember.
Yeah, I mean, I think the game is telling me check some other stuff out first.
Yeah, fair enough. You give it a try.
Let's do this for a minute anyway, and then. I'm gonna assume that you can't win that fight at the beginning against the rival Jedi, the rival Sith.
I think at some point it just goes into a cutscene no matter what you do.
Yeah. You'd hope that the game could recognize you in some way. Usually the Souls games give you like an alternate cutscene, or
yeah.
Sometimes you can get an item out of these things. You notice those are very slick transitions between gameplay and cutscene models.
Yeah.
It's almost a little jarring how smooth it is.
Those vines look like they lead somewhere. Hope they're sturdy. Yeah, I'm all right. Healing stem. You're full of surprises.
He just punched through all of his clothing.
Yeah.
His animal hide, his vest underneath.
Okay. Here, hop on board.
There you go. Now you can heal.
Nice.
Never known a forgetful droid. Can't argue with that.
Little shortcut. Very nice.
Think the Jedi would mind if we grab supplies? Where are you going?
That's cute.
So right there you got, I think, one of the lightsaber parts that you can use to customize
nice.
it. But it's all just cosmetic in the end.
That's kind of fun in a way.
I appreciate it, but I still, as many things as this game did right, I still missed equipment system. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't need it really. I guess it,
Maybe they felt like, normally in Star Wars, Jedi aren't deking themselves out in plus 50 helmets and stuff.
I don't know. I guess, but I mean, if Hogwarts Legacy managed to have surprising amount of armor like equipment options and looks, I think this game could have had that as well.
The game really wants you to know how the map works.
Yeah.
Come back here. So what was in there?
Poncho materials. Oh, heck yeah. I love it. Nice. Well, here's a meditation point. This seems like a good place to call it.
Yeah, might as well. So, Ian, what do you think about this game? Tell me, what do you expect versus what it actually was?
I heard some people say that the combat system was really in depth, but I guess I wasn't expecting it to be so freeform. Both in terms of game structure, giving the player a few different paths they can go down. In terms of giving the player a challenge and giving them like a pretty strong tool set to deal with things, like having that parry, being able to parry range targets and everything, like having certain moves that you have to dodge versus some moves that you can block. I think that's interesting. It's interesting having that. In the Souls games, you can block or you can dodge, and usually it's a little more. There's some. I'm trying to put it. It's a little more analog. Your success and failure when blocking versus dodging in the Souls games. Here, it's very binary. It's you must dodge this attack in this way, or you must block this attack, or else you're going to get hit. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, the unblockable attacks, right? Those are definitely there to. They use them throughout the game for sure. But I think overall, I've like throughout the years I've been getting disappointed in Star Wars games that just give you the lightsaber in your hand as soon as possible and just let you swing it all day long, 24/7. I think this game, all the elements together, like this exploration, the quiet exploration. Like as soon as you land in this planet, right, you can talk to the NPCs in the ship, but apart from that, you're just left alone. What do you think about that?
I think that's good. I mean, there's all kinds of different Star Wars games that explore different aspects of gameplay, and I see what you mean in that most developers seem to think, oh, players just want a lightsaber, they want to go ham with a lightsaber. But Star Wars isn't just about using a lightsaber, it's about using the Force, it's about exploration, it's also about story. So it's nice to see those things kind of in the mix alongside just combat, and then the combat itself feels quite good.
Yeah, I agree. All right, cool. I think that will do it for the episode. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.